Welcome back to another episode of Quarantine with a K. We're back for another week of random nonsense, and we've got a lot of new topics. Partially a continuation of something I started talking about last week, and I was like, no, I can make a whole episode about this. But here we are with that episode. So this is the 8th episode. I'll go ahead and say there won't be a podcast next week. There might be one the week after, but in any case, we'll be back for real at some point soon. But yeah, no stream next week. But for now, we're here, we're live, and we're hanging. So if you follow me on the internet, you'll know by now that I'm obsessed with The Last of Us. Best game ever. Probably one of the coolest games to see. I haven't played it myself because I don't have a PlayStation. Well, a PS4 anyway, and it's expensive for the new one. But I did watch a variety of different YouTubers play the first The Last of Us. And it's really interesting to see how people approach games. And this is before live streaming, so people had a chance to edit or whatever. So I watched some with commentary, some without, and in any case, it was really super interesting. And through it, of course, came a lot of discussion about different video game tropes in it, of course, the aesthetics of it, and then the science of it as well. So, I'm super hyped to talk about that because the new one comes out in, I think, 5 days. And again, PlayStation 5 is expensive, so I don't think I'll be buying and or slash playing it myself, but I'm super excited to see whoever play it. I'm gonna be clicking around on YouTube and Twitch until I find someone that's interesting and plays in a way similar to how I would, because I'm really interested to see where the story goes. Um, the first, so I'll give a quick summary, I guess, of the game before I hop into the topics. So the first game starts with Joel. I would say spoiler alert, but the game's been out for a while, so if you planned on playing it or watching someone else play it, this isn't the part of the stream for you. Come back in like half an hour. Um, but in any case, the first Last of Us starts with Joel, who is your main character, and he witnesses the start of the chaos that is the zombie apocalypse, and then we see a little bit of how he's living in his part, I guess, of the States, where it's kind of like a military enforced area, and they're like trading for weapons and ration cards because food is rationed, of course. Um, and to get more things, he uh ends up being asked to help smuggle a girl to uh I think to a different state or something, because people can't just travel freely anymore. And lo and behold, they find out, him and this other lady find out that the girl, Ellie, has been bitten and she appears to be immune to the virus. So they take her to wherever it is they need to go, and they encounter a lot of people, a lot of zombies, and the end of the game is them trying to use Ellie to see if they can make a cure for the virus, because she's the only one that they've found that's immune to it so far. Um, and at this point, Joel and Ellie have formed a bond. Ellie's like, I think Ellie's like 13 or something, so it's kind of like a chosen family type thing. And so at the end of the game, we see that he chooses to have her live rather than have them test to see if they can save everyone, because they don't think it'll be possible to do that with while keeping Ellie alive, and he doesn't want to lose Ellie, of course. So in the next game, we see it centered around Ellie's point of view, which is super, super exciting because Ellie's a really cool character. And of course, as time has gone by, the character has aged. And so we get to see Ellie kind of be her own entire person. And it seems like she's out for some kind of vengeance. And I guess in the game, we'll see why and against who and what her point is. Um, but if you heard the intro song, that's the soundtrack from the theme from the soundtrack for the first game. It's by Gustavo Santaolalla, who is a fantastic guitarist. He's also got songs in The Book of Life, if you've seen that movie. But the song's so cool. I've listened to that soundtrack so much. It's all like acoustic guitar, so it's really, really nice. Um, but anyway, there's a lot of things that I've been thinking about as I've been well, as I've ever since the first game, of course, and then as I've seen other feedback and other people speak on it, other people have opinions, of course. So, without further ado, let's get started with this discussion. Um, I guess for starters, I'll talk about the chosen family thing. It's kind of like, well, more so than chosen family, it's like a situational family, right? Like they're kind of forced to be in each other's space because well, because it's a job, right? So they kind of have to exist with each other. But through this came complaints from some people, not all people. Like the reception for the game has been pretty spectacular because it is a phenomenal game, like I said, in terms of visuals and how it manages. There was a little bit of wonkiness with the AI in which the characters would try to like hide in the same places that you were hiding and stuff like that. But overall, the game is really beautiful, really well done. You can tell that a lot of money and time went into it. Um, which I mean is also clear with the second one. They didn't want to make a sequel for the sake of a sequel, which is why it took so long to come out, because they wanted to have a story worth telling, so they said. But anyway, back to the family thing, right? People kind of complained that they're seeing a lot in different games and movies, etc., of this like chosen family dynamic, especially when it comes to somebody being the protector and the other being the protected, right? And there was an article I was reading that said that having Joel kind of like adopt Ellie as his own daughter after things go south when he's trying to get her somewhere that they asked her for her to be transported to. Um, they said that having stories told in this light speaks the language of the patriarchy, which I thought was a really interesting phrase, especially as someone who, again, if you follow me on the internet or if you talk to me in real life ever, you'll know that, like, strong female characters to me are not anything that's optional because there are strong female people in the world. Um, and a story shouldn't be, led by just wanting to fill a quota of character types, right? But that statement there made me think a lot about what that means and what that entails and whether or not that's something that needs to be considered when writing a story. Because from my perspective, I thought it was interesting to have well, for the most of the game, you are playing as Joel. There's a part of the game where you play as Ellie, which is what kind of solidifies what I thought of the game, which was to have the character be the protector that is Joel, right? And that's the character that you're playing as. It gives more room for the protected, right? The secondary character to be more of a complex being, right? There's more depth to that character because they have to write that character's entire story. So on the contrary, I thought that it was a good decision to have the game played, first of all, from Joel's perspective, and second of all, to have Joel be the one that's like protecting Ellie, because that way, as you're playing, you don't feel like there's this non-playable character NPC guiding your every step of the way and telling you what to do every single step of the way, right? And it makes sense for it to have been a job. They don't want a child to go wandering across the states in a zombie apocalypse because they could, be attacked by zombies or other people. And like I said, it gives more of a chance for that character to be developed and for that character to be um explored in different ways. And this isn't something you just see in this game or in games in general. Like you see this in movies a lot too, especially when it has to do with like um post-apocalyptic scenarios, right? Like there's always like someone that takes charge and is in charge of the group, and then there's always someone that like kind of hangs back and is told what to do. And in a movie, this argument would make more sense because it's like, oh, people are falling into like stereotypical power dynamics and roles in which people, I guess, have more grounds to say that it's a story that's been told before. Because from the perspective of a storyteller, um, because that's what my current interest is, right? From the perspective of a storyteller, that's what you need to aim to do. Tell a story that hasn't been told before, but something that will still interest the audience to pay attention to what it is that you're trying to do or what it is you're trying to say, right? And it also kind of uh, emphasized a point to where there's not really any um, idealization in the game, which again is something that I feel like should be celebrated about, right? Because we all want these perfect characters who are like unflawed individuals and they do everything right, but if that's how it goes, you kind of have to find a different way to tell a complex story. And I've talked about this before. I think in one of the episodes with my sister where we talked about like happy endings versus not. Oh, perfect timing. Hi, Charlotte. um, but there's kind of like a need for people to have a happy ending, right? On one hand. On the other hand, you have people that complain about happy endings because they're not seen as deep, right? They're not seen as complex. They don't make you think. But there's like a fine line that you have to walk between the two. And to have like every character be ideal and be like the perfect best version of themselves, you kind of start falling into like that category of just like, oh, this is like an ideal scenario. But if we're in a zombie apocalypse, you're following a character that is, I guess, breaking the, and they're not laws, the rules, I guess, of their camp. Um, for them to be able to hide an infected girl because they don't trust that she's not going to turn into a zombie herself, right? Like you have all of these different factors. There's no way these characters are going to be perfect because you also have to think of their backstories, right? A character goes further than the story that you see because in order to develop the character as is, the creators have to think of their backstory, stuff that's not written, stuff that you don't get to see, but stuff that guides their decisions. And so it's a little bit I don't know what the right word would be here. Like nearsighted maybe, to want these characters to be a certain way or to break a certain mold because you know what you'd want to see, right? You know what you feel like would be the best thing, especially when it comes to breaking like stereotypical video game tropes or just storytelling tropes in general. But for a starting point, you have to remember that these people had to make a game that would get people's attention. And of course, you can write whatever story it is you want to tell, but I just don't feel like this point applies here, especially because, like I said earlier, like it's a video game, it's not a movie. And the difference here is that you're playing as this character that is supposedly like the one dimensional, like, I'm mad at the world and I'm gonna do what I want, which is fantastic because that means more storytelling, I guess, tactics went into creating the character that is Ellie. And in the sequel, you get to play as Ellie, which hopefully will change this because in the sequel, Ellie's not like happy with Joel for making the decision for her. Like that's something that the game itself is exploring. So these complaints kind of like fall, I guess. It's more so kind of a moot point at this point because the game itself is addressing uh that very action that led people to say, "Oh, this is the typical protector making decisions for the protected." Like it's the strong man making decisions for like a weak female. But like again, it's a story that was told and then a story that's going to continue to be explored from that angle itself. Um, and like something that's really cool too is that the game developers, like I said, they said that they weren't going to publish the game until they were ready and had a story that they felt was worth telling. Um, so to me, it just puts more faith on my end that like it'll be something worth watching, right? Something that's hopefully going to be worth the money people are going to put into it. Um, because it is really interesting to see. Although I will agree with the critique, I guess, on the game giving you the illusion of choice, because the ending is the same, right? Like you can choose whatever dialogue option and you can choose whatever, like, I guess, type of character you're gonna be, like if you're gonna be forceful or if you're gonna be like following like everything that the game like guides you to. Uh but if the ending is the same, you really didn't have that many choices. The game officially comes out in 5 days, which I'm super excited about. But I'll have to wait for somebody to play it because I can't. Um, I will say though, like in the fight scenes, like you don't get to like uh you're not given that like illusion of choice. Like if you die, you die. Like you have to start over. But something that I do think is interesting is like you have like limited supplies, so you have to actually like be accurate with like your shots, with your um like items that you're using to craft. Like everything is very methodical, and the game is very sound based too, so you have to know like when to sneak around, when to listen for stuff. So like just overall it's such a good game. But I don't know, and it's interesting to see this discussions taking place even it is a good motto, even to till now after like the trailer has come out and we've seen that like that's not the same arc that they're taking. Like the game is completely been, I guess, flipped around, and we're seeing a new perspective, a new point of view, and it's really, really, really cool to me to see them do that, because instead of just kind of doing what the audience like wants, because you know everyone's a critic, right? They kind of decided to, I guess, take that critique in mind as they made it without giving people exactly what they mentioned, because then you kind of end up with like an endgame, Avengers Endgame scenario in which like you see something happen, but once you realize what's going on, you're not surprised because you've seen people ask for that before, right? Like we'd seen people ask for Captain America to be able to hold Thor's hammer, so once you get over the shock of like, yo, he did it, it's like, yeah, I knew that was gonna happen. But with this game, I feel like it keeps you on your toes. It's always interesting, and there's always things to discover. Um, but the science of it, to me, is also worth discussing because it leads to an even bigger discussion, which is the original creation of the virus, which is based on the cordyceps fungus. And allow me to get scientific here. And I was I was like taken aback when we learned about it in, I think it was either Bio 1 or Bio 2, but we learned about this fungus, and basically there's in the game it's an unidentified species of it that can infect humans, right? And that's how like you get the zombies in this game. But the actual the actual cordyceps fungus um infects insects, and I saw this example with ants, right? And so when ants contract this fungus, it's because it's parasitic, it takes over like the part of their brain that controls their behavior, and so it guides them to places that have like the optimal conditions for it to spread, and it'll start to sprout from within them. So like say that the perfect place is at the top of this leaf on a mountain, it'll like compel the ant to seek out that like top of the leaf on the mountain, like that temperature, that humidity, and then like it'll stay there until like the fungus has sprouted enough to like spread. And then once these spores spread, they find other insects to infect to also bring to the optimal situation and infect others. And so this game is based on that but happening with humans. And the humans' case, it makes them cannibalistic. And so for Ellie to have been bitten and to have been immune to it raises a question, which is how do you know if you're immune to the virus or not, right? Because if you're infected, you turn to a zombie in like 2 days, and that's that. You and everyone else around you is gonna be a zombie. What about antacid? Charlotte, shut up. But anyway, um, it leads to the point, right? Because you're gonna have the people that are like, wait, no, I got bitten, but like, what if I'm immune to it? You're not gonna know. And then in that time that they don't know, like, you risk them turning and then turning you into a zombie or whoever else. And it's very reminiscent of the current coronavirus crisis and the flu and just any illness in general, right? People always want to think that things aren't going to happen to them because they're the ones that are immune to it. And then, you don't know until you know, and by the time you know, it's too late. Um, but for this to be like a fungus that exists and affects other species, it puts it into perspective, right? Like, what if that actually happened? Like, what would you do? How would you react? Because we've seen how people reacted to being asked to stay on lockdown just for 2 weeks while the hospitals were able to like take care of the already sick patients. And of course, people we saw rioted in front of Capitol buildings, and the cops stood there just kind of watching them all go crazy with like all sorts of weaponry. And I'm like, dang, if that's what happens with a like super intense flu type situation, like to say it like in the lightest way possible, right? Like that's how they're taking it. They're taking it like, oh, it's just the flu, like what's it matter? If that's how the reaction is for that, imagine if it was zombies, dude. Like if someone in that crowd has the virus and you get the virus, like okay, you're gonna be bedridden. Worst case scenarios, you like develop pneumonia or something, right? Um, which could lead to like potentially death, right? But if it was a zombie outbreak, and someone in the audience, in the crowd, has been bitten and turns into a zombie while uh essentially rioting outside a government building and infects all of those people, and then they infect all of the cops and all of the government officials, like, dude, you just like took down an entire state. How quick before it spreads to the rest of the country and the world? Like, again, we saw how fast the coronavirus spread. Imagine that, but zombies. That's scary. People are scary. Not to be like people are the virus, but people are scary. um that's I feel like someone's gonna eat a bad shroom one day and that's where it's gonna start. See, there's a reason I don't eat mushrooms, and it is very much because this fungus are weird. Like if you've ever taken a earth science or biology class and you learn about fungi, they're bizarre, dude. They're like oddly resilient. They do all kinds of crazy things. It's wild. And like I said, I remember learning about the cordyceps thing, and I was like, wait a second, I've heard this somewhere before. And I was like, oh wait, that was the game, The Last of Us. And when I realized that, I was so shook. I was like, there's no way that's a real thing. And it turns out it is. And it infects humans. Um, I was reading about it earlier today too, because I was trying to make sure I knew what I was talking about, right? And there was something about like the benefits of cordyceps, and I was like, hold up, you're telling me there's people out here like trying to find benefits to this thing that like turns ants into zombies? This is how we get the virus. People doing too much science on too many things just to see like what if, and those what ifs are gonna lead to a zombie outbreak because you know science can go wrong. There can be accidental leaks, there can be an accidental spread, and before you know it, we're all zombies. It's wild. I remember there was whenever this game came out, there were a lot of people that like were discussing like what the possibilities of it would be, and then I didn't really pay attention to any of them. But when I took that class and I learned that it was like a real live thing that like affected real live like insects and stuff like that, I like looked it up to see if I could find any like discussion threads, and there were people like trying to see like how much it would have to mutate in order to infect humans, and like it's not like the most crazy thing to think about. Like You're telling me an ant made this acid? um, what was I saying? Science experiments. Oh, because like if you ever eat a fruit or a vegetable out of season, it was grown in like altered conditions, and that like fruit or vegetable itself was probably modified. Like that's why you go to the store and you get a thing of giant strawberries out of season and they're all weird and like deformed because like they're all like they've all been like genetically modified, for lack of a better phrase. Like everyone's scared of GMOs, but like a lot of the stuff we eat has already been GMO'd. But if people are just doing this so casually with fruits and vegetables, and like it's obviously they're gonna be experimenting with different fungi and plants just to see what can be done with them. Like, imagine being the person responsible for that like wrong mutation that leads to like the whole zombie outbreak. You can't see it because it's on the wall, and I don't have like a camera I can take off. We're still streaming from my webcam. Stay tuned to see if that changes. But I do have a World War Z poster right here from when the movie came out because I went to the movies and they had these, and I was like, I want one of those. Um, but that movie was a really, really I don't want to say like impactful because I feel like I've said that word about like more serious things. But there's a scene in it where you see all of the it's like a walled in like community area, town, city, whatever, and you see all of the zombies like climbing over each other to like go over that wall to attack the people. And like even with that happening, like there's still like people inside. Like a fight has developed, which is why they're being louder. But there were already people there like being loud, which like the sound attracts the zombies. And I remember seeing that scene. There's like you can see like the wall of zombies like forming and climbing, and there's the wall, and you see like the people over here like starting to panic. I'm like, that's how quick that spreads. That's how quickly things descend into chaos. And you see all these movies and you see all of this happen, like somebody imagined it happening, right? Like somebody was like, this would make a cool visual for my movie. And then you see everyone being like, oh, if this was the real world, I wouldn't do that. I would know exactly what to do. But when you have everyone thinking, I know exactly what to do, and something actually happens, these people haven't like all gotten together to like discuss who was correct about what the right thing to do was, and you see everything descend into madness because in their eyes everyone's right. And I don't know where I'm going with this tangent, but again on the topic, it's because I saw Charlotte's thing in the chat said people are the virus, tbh. um but like it's crazy. Like this is why we need like to have plans for everything, and I mean everything. I'm talking zombie apocalypse too. Like I don't care if it's never happened before. We need to be prepared because all of these like movies are turning out to be like quite prophetic. Which is insane. But maybe it's just life imitating art, right? Like we've all been influenced by the things we've seen, and that's why we think that that's the right steps to take because we saw a character do it in a movie or a video game once. But we make plans and we explore every single possible outcome. When it happens, we'll be ready, dude. Like, we can stop it from happening. Maybe. Possibly. Um, but anyway, that's been my rant about accidental rant about chaos and madness descending from people. But I don't know. I kind of want to go back to my original topic, which was again, just about like video game tropes and what they mean and whether or not they matter, like if that's important. Because it kind of goes back to even like I was saying about like people all going crazy over like coronavirus or like people in movies going crazy with like the zombie outbreak, right? Like people are complex, and to want these characters to be like your ideal version of a character, right? Like you don't want this to be a protector figure, right? You don't want this to be like a character that needs protecting. Like people are complex. They're not going to be your ideal person. Like how many times do you not sit there and be like, "Oh man, I should have done this instead. I should have said this instead." Like that's what movies explore, right? Like, what if somebody was in this situation and did that? And as a, I guess, extension of that, that's what video games do. They let you explore different options, because if you do something and you mess up and you don't pass through that level, like, you get a chance to do it again. And even with the complexity of characters, it's only going to be as complex as the character was written. You do get to see different options. Whether it's dialogue, whether it's how you approach a zombie crowd or a cluster of violent um, guardsmen at the end of a highway to a new gated community to protect themselves from the zombies or whatever nonsense, right? Like, in a game you get to explore all of that. And so, like, the game's going to be as good as you play it, right? Like, maybe it's hard and maybe that's frustrating, but like, you're going to see a game develop, like, as you play it, like, as you make the decisions. And with a game like this, like, that had a lot of thought put into it, like, you do get to see a lot of things. And there's other games too that are more like dialogue driven, which are kind of just like choose your own story adventure type things. But like, a character's not going to be the perfect person you want them to be, because they're based on people's real life experiences. Like, we write what we know, we create what we know. Like, you can't really think up something that you don't know. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, any invention you have is based off of things you've seen, things you need. Like, everything's connected. And so there's going to be references and there's going to be pieces of that in anything you make. So to like criticize there is even choose your own adventure movies. The Black Mirror one, Bandersnatch, was really cool. And that kind of backs us up too. Like, the characters are as interesting as you make them, because you're making the choices that shape them through the game. And I guess with a game like The Last of Us, that's not like, there's not a lot of ways you can go, because you're kind of just choosing dialogue and options to move through the story. Because like I said, there's like one ending there, right? Like, it can only go one way. um and I think your choice is just whether or not you tell Ellie the truth. But with the addition of a sequel, even that choice is kind of like, it's not made irrelevant, but it doesn't matter as much, because it doesn't matter what you told her, whether you told her the truth or whether you didn't. The next game is going to pick up with her still, like, having made a decision after that. And maybe that is reflective of us as people. Like, maybe we're sitting here thinking like, oh, if I'd done this, things would have played out differently. But in the long run, how much do your actions really affect your path? It goes into a much, much deeper conversation about whether things are predestined or whether free will is truly free. But um there was a Bratz one. Yo, I hadn't thought about that in like 30,000 years. Bratz is good. I've been on a Bratz soundtrack kick, because I recently saw someone post that like all of the songs from the Bratz movies were on Spotify. And let me tell you, there's some bangers, okay? Like, there's some good songs from all the movies. And uh they did Spanish versions of a few of the songs, and the Spanish versions hit. Alright, they're good. Do you think the new one's gonna just have one ending too? If they're following, like, I guess the model of the other games that they make, I think so. Whatever the options are for the ending, I don't think will matter in the long run, because as profitable as this series has been, and like as much as there is to explore, maybe they want to leave it open for a sequel or a spin-off or something, right? So if they do give you like completely different options for the ending, like one where a character doesn't make it, or one where the character is good versus evil, like, if they do give that option, I feel like that'll mean that it's the end of the series, right? It's the end of the game. I don't think it'll continue forth past that. So that might be a good tell. But in general, I feel like they're gonna choose something that will make sense for any path you decide to take. Um, but I'm trying to think of what the name of, I think it was called Infamous, but there was a game where it actually like tallied up like what your decisions led to, like whether you were choosing to be good or bad, and you had like a variety of different options, and there was like an obviously good one and obviously bad one, and then there were like two or maybe one or two like vague options, which could go either way depending on the choices that you'd made in the past. Like it would dictate like whether it was enough to sway like your good versus bad meter, and it wasn't called good versus bad. I think it was infamous versus righteous or something. But that game was really interesting, and I think that game also shaped how I think about like games like this where you have choices but they don't really matter in the end. Because this action will have consequences. Life is Strange is another one where you're kind of like let you the game itself lets you know whether you're making like the right choice or not, but in a very like that one's in a very subtle way. Infamous like tells you straight up like this is the good path, this is the bad path. We're not saying one's right or one's wrong, but these are the paths you can take. And there's some people that try to play it like kind of in the middle, but eventually you have to make choices that like very specifically say who you are and what you are. But having that like context, I guess, for game making and just for life, it really 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 makes you think. And Detroit Becomes Human, I think is what it's called. That one also gives you that like meter about like whether you're, but that one makes it more so not that you're good or bad, but it makes it so that like you know who your allegiance maybe, or who your alliance is to. I don't know which of those words is the right one for this sentence, but like that one like straight up tells you like, all right, this decision makes these people happy, not these well, I guess they're robots, androids. Um but Life is Strange just kind of tells you this action will have consequences. Like it doesn't tell you like this is going to be a good thing or a bad thing. It's just like something will happen, like you've triggered an event by saying this or by doing this. Um but having all of that kind of makes you consider the game in a different light, like afterwards, like critically, like not whether it's good or bad, but whether it's or more so like how like complex it is, right? Like how deep it is, like whether the decision is merited or not to have Joel be like this like angry like hardened man, and to have Ellie kind of just essentially like have to go along for the ride because that's the story they chose to tell, and not to be like dismissive of like criticism or anything, right? But like if that type of storytelling doesn't make you happy, like what's stopping you from writing something different, right? Like someone's got to do it, right? And if you're not the writer, you're not the creator, you're not the designer, if you're not like anyone that is in this space, thanks to the internet, like it's so easy to get connected with people who either are already in this industry or who want to be, right? And who are willing to put in the time and effort to make an idea like come true. Because if you find a gap in the market, like, and you fill it and there's an audience for it, like bro, people will watch, people will play, people will like celebrate that you've decided to tell a story that breaks the norm of what's expected in video games and from characters and from certain genres of stories to be told. Like if it doesn't exist already, make it. Find someone that will make it. Like you can criticize something so much, but when it comes to criticizing something like storytelling, it kind of doesn't really do much to do so, like other than influence other people's perspective, right? But I feel like there's just so much content out there. And of course, not all of it's good. Of course, not all of it's been created by like the biggest labels in the game, or in the game, what? In the industry, because we're talking about games in the gaming industry. Like, there's so much more content out there for you to find. Like, even Life is Strange is such like a niche type of game. Like, there's different issues addressed in it, there's different stories told from different perspectives. The characters are all complex and unique in their own ways. um and it's interesting, and it's a choice-based game. Or like Detroit Become Human versus Infamous, like they're games that kind of follow a certain narrative, a certain structure, and like you're supposed to follow a path, but the game lets you deviate from it. Of course you can only make like choices that are pre-programmed, right? but like you're given all of these different things that you can do, and the ending actually changes. Like the ending is different with these. And even just within that, like you see that even though the story structure might be similar, the story itself that's told is completely different. So you can critique something that's like the mechanics of the game, things that people can work on and improve like technically, just to create a better user experience. But when you criticize storytelling, you're really just shaping the way that people think about that story and about telling new stories, right? But that's where it stops unless you're, and it kind of falls on deaf ears unless you're talking like to the right audience, right? Someone that's going to make the one that you're trying to see, or someone that can help you make the one you're trying to see, right? Because we can sit here and argue or agree or disagree about, oh, this story should have been this character should have been that. But like, if I'm not going to go and make a game, right? If I'm not going to go and make a movie or a TV show or write a book or tell another story in some way that's going to reach more people, I'm not really influencing anyone. I'm just kind of like surrounded by either people who agree or disagree with my opinions, and that's where that stops. Because although there might be a butterfly effect, little nod there to Life is Strange, but there might be a butterfly effect to where someone else will hear it, and then that someone else will tell somebody else who will tell somebody else, and then they'll make the game, they'll tell the story, they'll change somebody's mind. um to get there, like, how long is it going to be, right? So it ends up to where you may never see that game or that ideal character that you wanted to exist because, thanks. What's up, Messiah? Just because it was never made, and you never, made that effort to tell it. So somehow we've gone from talking about the critique of people to me critiquing the people critiquing the critique. But that's this show, isn't it? It's just me going on tangents. Um, Especially when I'm left to my own devices with no structure like I had at the radio station. But I'm still very happy to sit here and discuss this because I feel like it's worth discussing. Um, of all the classes that I've taken, which I hate talking about school, but it started as a school show, so there's a lot of, it is a lot of critique. There's a lot of references to my schooling, and I guess that's the point of school, right? To help you become a more rounded individual. Um, but my critical thinking class was really interesting because in that class you had people who like tried to, I guess, read the articles and the assigned readings and discuss them from like their perspective. And then we'd have some classes where people would disagree a lot, or where people just didn't really care either way. Um, but having taken that class, it was interesting because I got to like see those critical thinking skills enacted by my professor onto the class itself. Like she would sit there and she would like analyze what we said, and it was like, hold up, that's getting kind of meta there. But in high school, I did a speech and debate team thing, um, which fell under the. I remember I think the initials were like NFL or something. But it's not like sports. It's like about speech and debate. I don't remember what it stands for. What do you remember, Charlotte? National Forensic League or something? Anyway, we followed like the structure of like speeches and debates, and we learned how to like make an argument and see things from either side. And we had a in-class debate because the teacher that was the advisor for that class was also like our English teacher. And in that class, yeah, National Forensics League, um my side uh won the debate because when we did our opening statement, I had already listed like, this is how we're defending our point of view, but if we had been assigned the other side, this is how we would defend that. So in our opening statement, we said like, this is why we think that we're correct. People who disagree with us might say this and this, but this is why we think that that's not correct. And the other team had prepared their argument and had thought that a lot of the points they were making would, I guess, be uncontested. But since we had already spoken about their their perspective before they had a chance to go over it. Instead, their opening statement kind of felt redundant, and whenever it came to the rebuttal, they had to kind of like double up on backing up the points that they'd already made to kind of respond to our like pre-made critique, and we were a step ahead because since we'd already addressed that and we'd already tried to address our own issues from that side, we didn't have to worry so much about like defending our point of view. We just had to answer the new questions. And like that experience also like has in conjunction with this critical thinking class on this specific topic because like I said, I've been thinking a lot about The Last of Us, and I've been looking up a lot of things because I've been interested to see what the people have to say. um I've been like just going over this like back and forth for myself, like, all right, I understand it, like it, yes, it is frustrating for like this character to only kind of follow what this character says and not really have very much of a choice for themselves. But from the other side, like, so I've been sitting here like debating this with myself. um and I don't know, my final decision is I like the game. I don't mind so much that like the first game had a pretty like a typical I guess structure, and one that wasn't like completely new because the storytelling and the like complex parts of the characters itself, like what makes them them, was interesting enough to like be a good story. Like it's not real life, like that's what I think a lot of people forget too, like not forget but like kind of set aside, like it's not real life, it just needs to be a good story that'll get people interested. And if you've ever watched a movie with me, you know that like as I'm watching the movie I'm like thinking about, oh, this character said that, what if they'd said that, like stuff like that. Like Charlotte in particular can attest to this because she lives in my house. But um to me it's interesting to like break down the choices a character makes and just kind of go along with them because they're people. Messiah, I mentioned this at the start of the show. I won't be getting the game because I don't have a PlayStation. Me and Charlotte have a PS2 and we play Lego Batman on it. But the PS4 was expensive when it came out, and now it's gone down. I was thinking about getting that, but then I was like, I'd also have to buy the game. The game's gonna be expensive too, especially right now. So I don't think I'll be getting it like right now when it's released. And the PS5 is crazy expensive, although it is absolutely beautiful. Like that design, man, I should have talked about the PS5, but yeah, I'm not getting it because it's expensive. But maybe in the future, once it goes on sale or something, I'll get like a PS4 and the game just so I can experience it for like from my own point of view instead of just having to go along with somebody else's playthrough. Um, Charlotte said I liked it because they went into detail with characters and backstories, like so much thought went into it. Yeah, right? Like you get to see why the characters are the way they are. Like you might not agree with it, but that's how people are. Like you meet people and you're like, man, I wish you were a better person, but like what are you going to do about their past? You can only shape where they like go from here. And that's exactly what the developers did, because now we get to see how Ellie deals with the consequences of Joel's actions. So it's cool. Um, Trout said, I feel like we combine our money in the PS4 and the PS5 was released. Yeah, but who's gonna buy the games, Charlotte? There's a lot more costs that go into this. Bro, me with a PS4 or even a PS5 someday. Dude, me just with a gaming console in general would be like a nightmare. I would never stop playing things because there's so many games to play, dude. There's so much stuff that I've missed out on, so I would be like catching up on old games and like having to play new games as they come out. Like I've started doing a few games just on my laptop when I got it, and like whenever I do play, like I'll lose hours to it, right? Like I can see how people get addicted to gaming because it's cool. Um, please let me know how it is. I'm so excited for it. Uh, you could stream it so people can watch along with you, and you could try to make a buck or two out of it, because that's life. And you said y'all getting the mini fridge or the Wi-Fi router? Charlotte already has a mini fridge. She's got to get the Wi-Fi router. I'll get my own mini fridge. That way we can split costs, have two fridges, and an additional Wi-Fi router so we can have faster internet. Because I'm surprised that this show has been handling so well. I was trying to download the episodes so I could watch them without having to like stay on the internet all the time. Um, and it took a long time to download. Like I was like, I know for a fact the internet is not this slow, but my download speeds are horrendous. Um, but that's been my discussion on my thoughts on The Last of Us. And oh, this is a reference to it. It's fading now, so you can't really see it. But in the original trailer that they dropped for this like years ago, Ellie, the girl, has like grown up and she has a tattoo now, and it's this like moth and like a fern or two. But I did this with Inkbox, which is my favorite thing ever. This isn't sponsored, of course. I wish it was. I've been tagging them in everything I do, trying to get them to love me or give me free things. Because I've bought a lot of these. But they sell this ink, and it, like, essentially stains your skin, right? It's like henna. And it used to last supposedly 2 to 4 weeks. Now it's 1 to 2 weeks. But in general, it's always lasted me about 2 weeks. Because, like, that's how my skin develops. But this is really cool. It's lasted about a week so far, and like it's fading pretty evenly, but it took me like 4 hours to do, and so I'm glad I've gotten a good like week's wear of it. But I'm happy with it. I tagged Inkbox in my story when I posted it, and they responded and they liked it and they asked me like, "Yo, did you use our freehanding? That's so awesome." Um, but I'm still crossing my fingers for that sponsorship because they'll like my mentions in their stories. Not all of them. That's how I know they actually watch it. They'll like the cool ones. And they'll like some of like the minimalist ones, but then there's some that I kind of just do to finish the bottle. I'm like, this isn't my best work, but like it is like art, I guess. And they'll just leave me on scene. But they'll like tell me like whenever I do really cool ones. And they featured me on their page once before with I think it was the one I did of Poseidon. All of that's on my Instagram if you'll want to follow me on Instagram, Carla Unofficial, which I'm pretty sure all y'all already do that are here right now anyway. So I guess this message just goes to whoever watches this after it's posted. Um, Charlotte said it depends on how fast your skin sheds. What am I, a snake slithering around? Did you notice turtles shed, by the way, y'all? Every time my turtle starts to shed its little scales, I'm like shook. I'm like, what's happening to you? Um, I feel like the ink is visible for a little over 2 weeks, but it's not like the full design. Like even this one, like I can see like some of the thinner lines like fading away. Throwback to my face tattoo. Yeah, that one was a decision. Thanks, Charlotte. It's probably a command. I don't know. I've been playing with the commands. I've been working on the bot thing for the stream a little bit more, but I haven't had time to do a lot recently. I don't know my own commands. I don't know how I'm even streaming this right now. Nothing makes sense anymore. Um, but yeah, good job. Uh, that's all I have for y'all this week. Mostly it was just my thoughts on The Last of Us. Yeah, it might not be a command. I know Twitter's a command. That one leads to the podcast Twitter, and then from there you can find me, and then you can find my Instagram. So it's kind of just like a really long like link tree uh of commands. But in any case, that's been this week's show. Thanks so much for hanging out. Thanks for chilling with me. Like I said earlier, we won't be back next week, but we'll be back probably the week after that on the 28th, and if not, on the 5th, and then if not, y'all will see. Your birthday's in 5 minutes, Messiah? Oh snap. Happy early birthday by 4 minutes. How old are you gonna be? You're my age, right? I think. Maybe. I think so. Um, that makes you a Gemini. We've had some talks about Geminis on the show before, and you've been here for talks about Gemini in the chat. But for now, we'll celebrate the Gemini traits, which are numerous as well. Because the duality of man is mostly exemplified in Gemini, as the stars foretold. Um, but yeah, without further ado, oh, 22. Nice, nice. It's your Taylor Swift year. How many times have you heard that? How many times are you gonna hear that? Sheesh, the absolute worst. But have fun being 22. Um, when I was your age, I'll be your age for like it's not 10 more days, 9 more days. It's my birthday's coming up too. But yeah, without further ado, that's been the show. Thanks for watching. Here's me signing off. Happy birthday again, Messiah. Happy Gemini season to any of y'all that are Geminis. Enjoy it while it lasts, because we're getting the best season coming up next. Alright. That's enough of me rambling. Thanks for the Vine reference, Charlotte. If I had everything pulled up right now, I would do it. I also want to get sound cues, because I have like the commands in the chat if they work. And I have like the stream layouts. Next step is alert sounds and soundboard box. But anyway, that's it. I'm off. Goodbye.